Well, welcome to the Three-Eyed Haven, Grand Haven Tribune's podcast looking at Game of Thrones. I'm Matt Young.
I'm Alex Sin.
Now, hopefully you realized that we didn't do a show last week, and this wasn't because we didn't like episode 5. We certainly liked it. We loved it. There was a lot of great things to come from it. Unfortunately, half of our production crew here, which is Alex, lost his voice, an upper respiratory infection that knocked him out for the week. So, and since I don't know how to work the technical aspects of this podcast, it wouldn't really do much good for me to do it on my own. So we apologize for that. So we're here to make it up to you right now with a little bit of an extended look. First, we'll touch briefly at episode 5, leading into the final episode ever of the Game of Thrones. It resonates a little better with us than it does with the social media masses. Would you agree with that?
I would say that's true. That has been fun and disheartening to watch. A lot of the backlash to this episode, or these past 2 episodes, people feel that it's really gone off the rails. But I think that there are some really high points that are worth appreciating. And so we're going to spend some time doing that.
Yeah, so jumping back to episode 5, it seems like a long time ago. I think I've watched it 4 or 5 times since then, so no, not really, but I did watch it again. And so what stands out to me is at the beginning of that episode, you see Jon coming ashore. Varys goes down, talks to him, and has this line that is just broods with foreshadowing. And he says something to the effect that every time a Targaryen is born, the gods flip a coin and hold their breath. We're still kind of waiting to see what happens with Daenerys' coin, but we felt like yours has landed right side up. And Jon kind of gives him this look and brushes him off and keeps going, unfortunately. Tyrion sees that and reports it back to Daenerys, and that spells the end of Lord Varys, who's one of the longest standing characters in the series. And he gets to go out in a blaze of glory. Not many people get to, well, actually, as we see a little later on, a lot of people get to meet their end due to dragon fire, but not when you're standing there as the sole recipient of it. So his life comes to an end, his role in the show comes to an end, but that really foreshadows what comes up in this episode is which side of the coin lands up for Daenerys. And it's something that we've kind of had a hints that we might see, but it really came to play in this episode. Yeah, so Tyrion finds out that Jaime's been captured, heading back south to try and get into King's Landing. Tyrion realizes that if Daenerys had just told him, "Fail me again and you're dead," he walks down and frees Jaime basically, and gives Jaime and Cersei basically an escape plan. He says, "Hey, go down to the basement where the dragon skulls are. Keep going down. There'll be a boat. Row away, and we'll never see you again, and you'll escape." So Tyrion here. We've talked about it a bit, out of contention for that top spot on my list, but he's proven again that he's actually a pretty good guy. As much as he comes across as kind of the scoundrel early on, he's willing to risk his life to save his brother. He has a really touching moment in there where he gives Jaime a hug and says, "You're the only one who was ever nice to me. Like, father hated me, Cersei hated me, everyone hated me. You're the only one who was nice to me." And, Jaime obviously released Tyrion after having killed Tywin Lannister, and he's facing, cerulean pain and having his head chopped off, and Jaime releases him and gets him to where he is, so Tyrion's willing to repay the favor, and I thought that was pretty awesome.
And then we have the Hound and Arya kind of hatch a plan to go inside. Jaime has his own plans to get inside and get to Cersei, and so they're kind of moving in the wrong direction if you want to survive as Daenerys' army gets ready. Up to this point, I had complained about some of the pacing and issues and some of the logistical things about this battle that's supposed to take place. We were really led up to this point to think, okay, do they have enough soldiers? Are they well enough equipped? Can they actually take down King's Landing? Can they actually get in there and defeat Cersei? And all you see are these shots of Cersei just standing up there.
So smug
and arrogant, and you think she has to have a trick up her sleeve. There's no way. There's got to be something there that we're not seeing.
Well, she's already taken out one of the dragons in the previous episode in a stunning fashion. You know that the North Army is haggard and beat up from the battle with the Night King and his forces, and then just marched a month down to King's Landing. So it looks right now like Dany and company are not playing with a full deck coming into this battle.
And that doesn't turn out to be the case because apparently all they needed was one dragon to torch the entire enemy and the city. And
almost in casual fashion. I mean, they didn't even break a sweat.
Exactly. And that, I think, is the whole crux of this episode. None of those questions and concerns we had actually really mattered.
Well, and we had debated, like, the previous episode, you saw the one dragon shot down, the other one, Drogon racing headfirst toward the ships, and all of a sudden they're shooting these giant bolts at him. And, well, big ships are slow. Why couldn't you just come in from the side? Like, he's got the Scorpions on King's Landing on the walls, but they don't turn very fast. Why couldn't... Well, it turns out they certainly could do that because you see Dany come up and she dodges the one bolt and she's just kind of like, see you later, Euron Greyjoy and Iron Fleet, and they're done. I mean, in a matter of moments, she's carved through that fleet and basically destroyed it. Then she comes up, and one of my favorite scenes from the episode is when Drogon's like coming, like, lazily skimming across the water, like I think his tail's like creating a ripple, and you see these giant scorpions aimed at him, and he's just like goes along the side and just boom, destroyed. And the ease with which he takes down anything in his path, whether it's a building, whether it's a castle, whether it's a tower, whether it's, as we see a few minutes later, the walls. You see the Golden Company standing there facing off against the army of the North and the Unsullied and the Dothraki, and all of a sudden the wall explodes from the inside, and there's Drogon just totally blasts it, and at that point the battle's over.
I love the moment she basically gets done with all of that,
yes,
and then perches Drogon on top of the wall. Mm-hmm. And you kind of have this stare down. I don't know if they're even close enough to see each other, but you kind of just Cersei can certainly see this dragon.
Yeah.
And it's kind of just this stare down moment, this really quiet moment in the midst of this chaos. Mm-hmm. And you just see the looks on their two faces, these two blonde-haired rulers, right?
Yes.
And for me, I was like, oh, Cersei's got something coming. Like, something is about to go horribly wrong. What is it? And it turned out to be the exact opposite of that. And it was Daenerys reaching her absolute breaking point, yes, and deciding to torch all of the civilians.
Because Tyrion had set it up that if we can ring the bells, the city is going to raise the gates, they're surrendering, call back the troops, let's save these millions of people in this beautiful city, and the bells ring, and you sit there and you can see Dany's face as they're ringing. And instead of like, oh, we did it, she just hardens and gets this look on her face. And at that point I'm thinking, okay, does Dany know that Cersei's up in this tower up here? Maybe, like, could she just fly up and like torch that tower and be done with it? Like, because that's what she wants to do, right? Is kill Cersei and win the war. But instead, she goes full out Mad Queen. It kind of tore me up to see like this ancient. I mean, I don't know if it's an ancient city. I don't have any big, connecting to King's Landing, but you just see everything just being destroyed. I mean, these houses, buildings, castles, whatever, keeps, whatever they're called. I mean, just it looks like something made out of Lincoln logs that you decide to kick over and just destroyed. And
the look on Jon's face, yes, too, when he realizes that she's decided to do that. And he's trying to get them to fall back, but Grey Worm is faithful to the end to her, and he can't call them back. And you just see his hurt from that. And then we end up going inside of the keep, and Cersei finally, her complexion is broken, and you finally see her in total fear and existential crisis and fear for her baby and for her life, and she and
Qyburn and the Hound, the
Mountain, they kind of make their way down this crumbling keep and end up running into the Hound.
Arya's following him, and he's like, I'm going to kill my brother. What are you going to do? I want to kill Cersei. And he's like, you know what? Look around. She's done for already. He's like, you don't need to live your life like I have. And it was a pretty cool moment because obviously, he hasn't said a nice thing to a person ever. Like, I mean, he tries to stay gruff. He tries, even though you can tell he's got a good heart, eventually, that's the first time that he really gets down on her level and says, listen, girl, don't go to where I am. Save yourself, turn around, leave. You don't need to go this route. And then she has that scene where she calls him Sandor, and he turns around, and it was a pretty cool moment. And a lot of us were hoping to see Arya take out Cersei, but it didn't happen. But so we do see the Hound in the mountain battle, and you knew this was coming. And this was one of those just incredibly cool looking scenes where they're on the crumbled staircase. You see the dragon fly over, you see fire, you see the wildfire, the green batches of it burning up in the distance, and they start fighting, and it was pretty crazy.
It was great. I mean, this is one of those very high special effects moments.
Sure.
But it was the end for those two characters. This was a battle that has been brewing since the beginning of the show. So
yeah,
I thought that was satisfactory, and you knew that he was going out. The Hound was not going to make it through this show.
No, and the fact that he, obviously has been so terrified of fire his entire time here. Obviously, that's what led to him being disfigured in the first place, was his brother putting his face down on a hot hearth. So the fact that he was willing to tackle his brother into that flaming inferno down there was pretty incredible. I mean, it was one of those moments where you're going out literally in a blaze of glory. And obviously, we kind of figured, I think, that this was going to be the end of both those characters, and it was a great way for him to go out.
And then we have Jaime and Cersei running into the, catacombs or whatever, kind of the bottom dwellings of the keep, and they just have this last moment together, really, where they're freaked out and crying and in total despair.
What got to me was Cersei actually finally looked human. She's been the one that's been so cold and so heartless through everything. I mean, willing to, blow up the entire, was it the Red Keep, where the things were going on with Marjorie Tyrell and the Sparrows, and I mean, everyone. She blew up the entire thing, killed thousands of people. I mean, she did so much. And finally here at the end, she breaks down and sobs, and I don't want to die. And you see her as a real person just for a moment, and then the ceiling comes down on them. And I think a lot of people that I read reactions were upset that they went out this way, but I think you can't have everyone dying by the sword or dying by, being, a stealthy assassin or something. I didn't really have a ton of trouble with this. I mean,
I liked it.
Yeah.
I preferred this because you expected there to be a dagger through her heart at some point for Arya to come up and stab her in the back. But but in this case, it was literally the keep. It was that, structure of power that fell on top of her and killed her. And she died in the dark with no one to see her. There's no one to be, valiant or to come out on top. It was just destruction, and I thought that was an interesting way for her to go. And really, we haven't seen her since she was a captive of the cult that takes over for a while there. That season was brutal, where she was a captive and then had to be walked through the streets in the shame.
Her walk of redemption, yes.
And I think since that moment, we have not seen an emotion cross her face. She has felt like an evil character ever since then. And up until this moment, we haven't seen her really lose it and break down. So I thought that was powerful. People felt that she wasn't really given it a chance to shine, but I thought she did a great job.
So Jaime and Cersei are gone, and then all of a sudden we see Arya, and she's scrambling to get out of here. And I think you and I both agreed that this was done in a really cool way. I mean, obviously the showrunners talked about the fact that you can only get so emotionally invested in a bunch of faceless peasants getting burned by dragons. But the minute you have Arya down there, one of the main characters of the entire series, in dire peril, running for her life as the dragon is torching, and there's fire, and there's buildings collapsing, and troops pillaging and killing and raping, and Arya's right there in the middle of it. And all of a sudden you kind of catch your breath, and it's like, well, I don't really care if any of those people make it out, but I want Arya to make it out. And you're seeing it from her perspective. You're on the ground. You're seeing the terror from above. And just the perspective, I think, was pretty awesome.
It really felt like a war movie, a lot like Saving Private Ryan or something to that effect, where there's just a lot of chaos and things crumbling and it felt like bombs were really going off, and it was a total war zone, and she just looked so bad. I think didn't she like black out a couple different times, have blood all over her, and it was just brutal.
Walls collapsing, and
and she tries to save this mother and daughter, and they end up roasted in the street, and that was awful to watch. But I think that you really got a sense of the consequence of Daenerys turning the way that she did.
And you also have one more person joining Jon and Tyrion, who now is looking at Daenerys saying, no, I don't think so. This is not the person we're going to be willing to bend the knee to.
And then she finds this horse, this beautiful white horse out of nowhere.
Which kind of brings back to Dany in the early episodes when Khal Drogo gives her a silver stallion, and that's like her gift when first or second episode, and that's like one of her most treasured possessions. And so you've got a horse that kind of brings back to that rescues Arya. She's able to kind of all of a sudden trot safely out of the city. And but we kind of end there.
That's pretty much the episode. Yeah. Those are the high points. I think obviously Daenerys turning, making that decision was unexpected. I thought it was an interesting surprise. Cersei dying in the dark, and then just the war and chaos that we get out of this episode, I thought was shocking. So I thought that was really effective, and I liked that episode overall. I was excited after seeing that for the finale.
Just because we've had so much time and energy invested into watching this, reading the books, watching these over how many years, knowing that it was the last one was really disappointing. It's like getting to the last chapter of a book that you've really loved and you know it's going to be done. Whether or not you have a prediction of what's going to happen, you kind of want it to just keep going on. You hate to admit that you're getting to the end of it, but that's where we were. We knew that we had about 80 minutes left to watch, and it was all going to be wrapped up. And, how are they going to wrap it up? What's going to happen here? So you kind of come in, and we join Tyrion again walking, and Jon and Davos surveying the damage, and you see burned bodies everywhere, and you see the guy walking by with like his back burned off, and just the horror that's been inflicted. And we don't see any live people other than a handful of Lannister troops who are being executed by Grey Worm. I don't know if there's anybody left. I mean, you certainly can't tell, but you can just see the devastation, and you can clearly see that those three in particular are just totally disgusted by what's happened and totally not on the same page with what Daenerys just did.
Yeah, I think we get a sense that this was wrong, that this was the outcome that maybe could have been avoided, should have been avoided, that this shouldn't have happened. And we see that in our characters' faces, and we know what Jon's thinking, we know what Arya's thinking. We know that Tyrion is absolutely devastated. He's lost his entire family at this point.
Yeah.
And, he became so loyal to Daenerys and such an important part of her strategy. And now he's fully convinced himself like this was the wrong choice.
Yes. You were kind of brought back to what Varys had said, like, I'm here not for one person but for the realm. And I may have seen a lot of different kings, but every time I realized that this one wasn't right for us, I went to the one who was. And I think Tyrion's realizing that he probably should have seen this a little sooner. So we see Jon walking through these lines of troops, kind of parting his way through the Dothraki who are celebrating, and then you have the Unsullied in these very strict lines, and you see this startling shot of this huge, I don't know if it's a cathedral type building. Part of it's wrecked, and there's this giant Targaryen banner hanging up. And I think the symbolism, like looking kind of like a Nazi banner, I mean, it's kind of it's red and black. It's kind of the symmetrical, almost like a Nazi symbol, and you see all these troops lined up in it. It certainly does harken back to the Nazi regime. I think that's what they're going for, and that certainly resonated with me.
It felt like Star Wars, some of the iconography of the villains there.
Yeah.
Or Voldemort or something, but it definitely had that, like, oh man, this is the new regime. Like, we already changed over, and this is starting.
Dany comes out, and she's now dressed in all black, which I think is a
quick wardrobe choice.
Yeah.
That made sense.
And she goes on to this impassioned speech, basically about how this isn't the end, this is just the start. They've got much more left to conquer.
In Dothraki as well, and whatever the Unsullied speak, right? So she's speaking a language not familiar to our other protagonists.
Yes, exactly. And so Tyrion walks up and she said, "You freed your brother." And he said, "I freed my brother. And you killed a city." And he throws his pin down, the hand of the kingpin, and he's taken away. And Jon comes to see him. And this conversation, I think, was, to me, kind of the crux of how this last episode was going to go. Because Tyrion's saying, "You wouldn't have done this." And Jon's like, "Well, I don't really know. Like, it's hard to say." And Tyrion's like, "You do know. You would not have done this." And he's like, Tyrion has a line where he says, "Everywhere she goes, evil men die, and we cheer her." And he said something else that I thought was really interesting. Jon said, "Does it really matter what I do?" And Tyrion says, "Yes, it matters more than anything." These are Tyrion saying, "You need to take up this mantle. You're the only one who can save us now from this, what we thought was our queen, who's now gone full, tyrant mode." And so Jon breaks out a line from Maester Aemon, "Love is the death of duty." And Tyrion says, "Sometimes duty is the death of love." And just these great lines that these two have. Yep. And it's like,
I loved this moment.
Yeah.
Because it's about Jon's choice.
Yeah.
And Jon's like, you can't really tell the difference between. It's like, of course you can. Like, you can tell the difference between good and bad.
Yeah.
And you know that choice better than anyone.
Yeah. Tyrion says, "It's a terrible thing I'm asking, but it's also the right thing." And then I think he really catches Jon with a low blow in the gut when he says, "Do you really think your sisters are going to bend the knees? Was she talking like someone who's done? She's not going to stop until she's conquered everyone. And if Sansa's not going to bend the knee, then what do you think's going to happen?" And I think right there, Jon's like, oh man, like he basically said, Sansa doesn't get to choose. And Tyrion said, "No, but you do, and you better choose now." And of course, then we're transported to Jon walking back up, and you see, I think this is where you see that scene where Drogon's laying under, we debated whether it's ash or snow at this point. Ash from the burning city or snow from...
I want to say it was almost intentionally ambiguous because it does, in different shots, it looks like one or the other. And of course, when the city's burning, it's definitely ash. But then I think at this point, you have a sense that winter has come.
Yeah. And then Drogon gets up and sniffs Jon and lets him pass. And so Jon goes up and has this last interaction with Daenerys. And I don't know at this point if he's made up his mind. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I just wanted to say that I think this is some of the frustration people have is that we get Jon's decision in one scene, and then the very next scene, here we are with him carrying out that decision.
Yeah.
And so it all does happen so suddenly that you don't have a lot of time to think about it. But here we are in this room, and no guards in sight. So
we could have seen him stew on it for an episode or 3, but no, you're right. We go from...
It was very sudden, but we knew it was coming. It had to happen.
But I think it shows, he didn't have much time to think about this. It shows the urgency of that decision. It's not like he could sit there and make a pros and cons list and
probably
debate
better
it.
that he didn't do that.
I mean, he had to decide.
He might have chickened out of it.
Yeah, he had to decide right here and now, what am I going to do? And so he goes up and, they have a nice conversation. And Jon kind of begs Dany to forgive Tyrion and to forgive others. And he says something like, the world we build has to be a world of mercy. And Dany basically says, well, I'm the one who knows what's good. They don't get to choose. And I think that was the last straw where basically she says, it's up to me, not anybody else. And so they come in for a kiss, kissy, and all of a sudden you hear the and we're watching this, and still at that point I wasn't sure what was going to happen.
Well, both of their eyes showed something, and you're like, oh no, she didn't just take him out, did he?
No, because it wasn't really
thought
clear.
That a second,
Yes. And I will say my wife, who's been Team Daenerys all the way through, we even got her the Mother's Day card that unfolds and says Mother of Dragons. She was like, I'm glad you got me that before these last 2 episodes because I don't think I would want it anymore. But she was like, oh no. And then you see the little bit of blood come out of Daenerys' mouth and she lays down. And I was shocked. I mean, you kind of thought something might happen, but still to see it
just to see it right then and there.
It was stunning.
Yeah, it was shocking. I do want to say, just to kind of wrap up with Daenerys as a character. Like, people felt that her turn to darkness was not well supported, but I feel that both through foreshadowing way back into the early seasons, and I felt especially this season with some of the development we get with her, especially like up at Winterfell, watching Jon and everyone celebrate, and everyone loves Jon,
Yes.
and she's isolated. She's isolated herself because all this time, through all these seasons, she's not been making allies. She's been making enemies. Her allies have come to her through fear. Tyrion had to, kill half his family and escape to end up on her side, and the allies she had left had died at Winterfell. So she's really alone at this point. Jon's the only one she has, and her dragon. So I felt like it was pretty well supported.
Yeah, and there were certainly hints. I mean, Tyrion clearly has known what's going on because he's been begging her since they got to Westeros not to just go, totally crazy and burn everybody to the ground, because clearly, as we saw in the last episode, she was capable with her dragons as they were of doing whatever she wanted and conquering anything that stood in her path. There was nothing that was going to stand up to her. But Tyrion kept on saying, there's no point in ruling over a dead kingdom that you've burned to the ground. I mean, Tyrion was desperately clinging to her, trying to hold her back and keep her in line. And turns out in the end, he wasn't able to do so. So yes, there were clues. I mean, whether it's how she torched Lord Randall Tarley and Dickon, to how she torched Lord Varys. I mean, the way she killed so many people. I mean, Tyrion actually goes through when he's talking to Jon and kind of lists all these things that she did, where at the time, I guess you could have spun it as she was doing this for the greater good, but every time that there was somebody that stood in her way, she killed all of them.
I almost feel like her madness explains some of her stupid decisions strategically in some of these battles, like how she let her dragons die, how she kind of leapt into battle in Winterfell and then just charged right at the ships in the previous episode. I feel like that kind of explains that maybe she wasn't of totally sound mind when she was making those decisions.
Yes, and it's hard. I mean, this is someone we met as a sweet, innocent little girl who was sold off to Khal Drogo in the first episode, and goes through a very...
She really felt like a champion at times.
She did. I mean, she was the one who...
She freed slaves. She did amazing things.
And we thought that she was here for good, but as she... I think once she got to Westeros, I think we started to see a different side to her. And I think she was not comfortable in her homeland. She had never been there before. She didn't know anything about it. Nobody knew her. It was clear when she went up to Winterfell, everyone stared at her as if she was, completely foreign to them. I mean, there was no thank you for coming up and saving us. Everyone looked at her, and I think that really resonated too, the fact that she was viewed as an outsider in what she considered her homeland.
Right, and I think she was complex throughout the series, and I think she was one of the highlights of the show. I think she needed to go at some point, unfortunately, but I think it's more sad than anything. I don't think she could have.
Definitely.
Maybe she could have been good, but the cards didn't fall that way, as Varys indicated. That the coin was flipped and it didn't come up on her side. So
no,
it was kind of a tragic ending to her story. But.
So Jon, who clearly still has feelings for her, is lowering her to the ground, crying, because this is not something clearly that he wanted to have to do. That Jon's not the one. I mean, who's going to do this willingly without really taking a toll on him. And as he's doing this, you hear the dragon in the background. And then you see it flying up, and here Drogon lands, and he looks. And he kind of noses her and kind of sniffs her. And then he looks at Jon, and part of me is kind of like, the comic book, not that I ever read comic books, but you kind of wanted Jon to jump on Drogon and fly off and now I'm the Targaryen who's got the dragon.
I thought maybe he could have tried to torch Jon and not succeeded, and then realized, oh, he's the Targaryen.
Yeah.
There's a few ways that could have been epic and cool, but I thought this was the tragic way, and obviously, we didn't write the show. So.
No. But another scene where, Drogon comes back, it looks like he's going to torch Jon, and instead torches the Iron Throne. And I will say, not to pat myself on the back, but we filled out these little sheets before the season
That's
about
right.
who was going to sit on the Iron Throne. I said nobody. Drogon's going to melt it, or the dragons are going to melt it.
Nice.
And so I was kind of excited to
Nice.
see that because that was pretty cool. And you see John like shielding his face and the flames. I mean, talk about some incredible, CGI. The dragon's mouth, that I mean, is just terrifying. Looking into the maw of this dragon, and you see these little pits in his mouth where the flames come from, and it's just gross and scary and terrifying all at the same time. But he melts the Iron Throne, and you see it like dripping down. And how great was that? Just to it's almost like the dragon sensed that all this pain has been caused by this one stupid chair made out of swords. I'm putting an end to it, and then we're flying away forever. So he picks up Dany and flies away, and I kind of hoped Jon would have something to do with the dragon, but I think this is the way it probably should have been. Because if the dragon remains, the balance of power is totally skewed. There's no way that anyone can stand up to that one person.
If we could pull in Lord of the Rings one more time, there's early in that series they talk a lot about Bilbo and the Hobbit, where he's got these two sides, these two like the Took side and the Baggins side. So he's got like this adventurous side and this kind of domestic side, right? And like,
more docile
and I feel
side.
like with Jon, we see him have that Targaryen side, and he's got his Stark side.
Yeah.
And I feel like in the end, he appeals to his Stark side, and
Yes.
we could see him valiantly riding off on a dragon. But is that really the side of him that we want him to embody? It's really not. I think we want him to be who we've seen from the beginning. I mean, he's had these epic moments in battles, and he's a great leader, and he's a fierce warrior, but I don't think I want him to be a Targaryen.
No. Well, I mean, the whole thing is, right, the Song of Ice and Fire, and he exemplifies that more than anyone because he's made of half ice and half fire, right, with half Stark, half Targaryen, and it's clear that the ice wins out, the cool side wins out, and he does, he stays and watches it, and then we kind of, if you hadn't been paying attention to the clock, there was a pretty prolonged dark, fade it to black.
It was almost an intermission, yeah.
And I was kind of thinking, like, are
this
the
it?
end credits going to pop up? Because I'd actually be okay with it. Like, this was kind of cool. Like, I like having a bunch of unanswered questions. I don't like everything to be neatly wrapped up in a bow at the end.
I don't think they need to be.
And I was kind of thinking if it ended here, I would be okay with it. Like, holy cow, this was awesome. I don't know what's going to happen to Jon. Obviously, there's a huge army standing outside the door. But no, it comes back in and we see Tyrion laying on the floor of a dungeon. And it's clear once he gets up and you see his huge beard that he's been there for quite a while. And then he gets let out and we still don't know what's happening. And we get out.
Do we think it's been like 2 weeks, something like that?
It's hard to say, yes.
Maybe
but
a
I
month.
think he makes a statement in there like these last few weeks, a little ways in, to where it shows that it's been several weeks that he's been held captive. We still don't know where Jon is at this point, but we're brought out to the dragon pit where we've had the meeting previously where they showed Cersei the weight, and it's clear that some time has passed because nothing's burning or smoldering. There's no snow, there's no ash. It looks clean and bright and sunny. It's almost like a new beginning is what it looked like to me. I mean, it's like everything's cleaned up. We're back to, things are fresh and new again. But we had no indication of what's going on here. And you look around and we see all these people that we haven't seen in seasons. You have, what's the Aaron
Don't
boy?
ask me the names, 'cause
Robin,
I
Aaron,
forgot
and
them.
Jan Royce from the Vale, and you have Catelyn Stark's brother, who's up there, and we haven't seen him in such a long time, Edmure, and we've got a couple people we don't know, someone who looks like they were clearly supposed to be from Dorne, who I don't think we really know who that was. Some other people that aren't really identified, but kind of the whole crew's back together again, and it's like, whoa, what's going on here? Like, it was definitely kind of confusing to see, and then you see the Starks, Arya and Sansa and Bran are there, and so basically they bring Tyrion out. And
Grey Worm brings him out.
Yeah, Grey
Who
Worm
was the
brings
only
him
one
out.
really who stuck by Daenerys' side all the way through.
And Tyrion starts talking, Grey Worm, you're not here to talk. And it's like, oh man, he's in trouble. Like, is this the end of Tyrion? We thought it's coming several times. But then they start talking about the fact that they're here to kind of start a new Westeros together. Like, how are we going to move forward? And Tyrion makes a statement, we've got the most powerful people in Westeros here. You don't have a king. Choose one. And it brings up kind of an awkward sequence where Edmure gets up and kind of tries to make his pitch, and he's told to sit down, and Samuel Tarly gets up and says, what about democracy? And everyone laughs, and one guy's like, I'll ask my horse who we think should be king. And like, they're clearly not ready to embrace that.
Let's be honest, it's a pretty stupid idea.
At this point.
They don't need to go that way.
At this point, yes. So he sits down. And then, of course, who else but Tyrion gets the chance to make his pitch? And at this point, I think a lot of us were probably thinking he was going to make a pitch for Jon, right? I mean, we've had this.
I was kind of hoping he was. I thought that's where it was going, and that's where I was hoping it was going.
And he starts talking, and he goes into this kind of odd thing. He says, what unites people? Yes. Is it this? Is it that? Is it that? Actually, it's stories. There's nothing more powerful than a good story. Nothing can stop it. And who has a better story? And I thought he was going to say than Jon, but no. He says than Bran the Broken. And I was kind of like,
I was lukewarm too, because I'm like, okay, who has a better story than Sansa? Let's be honest.
Yeah, there's a lot
who
of people.
Who has a better story than Arya?
Got a better
That's
story.
That's an amazing
than all
story.
Of them. Yeah.
I think there are quite a few good stories within our story here. Obviously, the appeal to stories uniting us, and we get that at the end of a lot of stories, right?
Yes.
But it's, I thought it made sense. It's just, I mean, is Bran's the best story? Like, I don't know if it really is.
No, I don't think Bran's.
I don't really know what kind of king he'd make. I think he's pretty calm, at least.
Really impassionate. Like,
yeah.
He doesn't really care about anything.
He's not emotionally charged.
But basically, Tyrion says he knew he'd never walk again, so he learned how to fly. He's our memory, the keeper of all our stories. And he kind of goes through and he looks and says, if we choose you, will you wear the crown? And Bran looks at him in kind of his smart aleck way and says, why do you think I came all this way? So clearly Bran knew what was coming. I mean, we haven't yet really determined. Bran can obviously see the past. We don't know if he can see the future, but he seems pretty clairvoyant about what's going on, and I think it's pretty obvious that he knew this was coming.
We've discussed that. It's kind of unclear. Like, he probably has some sort of premonitions or something, but doesn't have every piece of the puzzle laid out in front of him. So who knows? It's kind of weird that usually that kind of character who has some sort of prescience would be like a wizard or something that would be assisting a king. The kings are usually a little more stupid, but
yes,
interesting choice, I guess.
Well, and so you would think you've got all these people here. You think somebody would argue. Somebody, I mean, whether it's Yara Greyjoy, who had already said we supported Daenerys, that we didn't want her dead, whether it's someone else who's got some aspirations of power, but no, nobody raises a single word. They just start going around and start voting. And I think my favorite part of it is when they're saying I, and they get to Davos, and he says, I don't know if I even get a vote, but I guess. And it goes through, and then I shouldn't say no one argues, because then we get up to Sansa. And Sansa, who you'd think would be the first one to say, yeah, I'll say yes to my brother, says, well, actually, the North's not going to kneel to a king, even if it is my brother. We're going to remain independent. And again,
I like that.
I kind of did too.
I like Sansa being the ruler of her own world up there.
But you kind of think, like, somebody's going to say something, right? Like, why do you get to be independent if not me? But nobody questions her. So I think this kind of went through too smoothly. But we didn't have time to have a huge, drawn-out debate. I don't think anybody would have wanted to watch it. Although you think there could have been a bit of conflict interjected into here.
Yeah, I thought they went for more of some humor there as opposed to a serious debate. So, who knows? I guess make of it what you will. I don't know if I'm like really thrilled about Bran, but that's what we get, and it could be a lot worse.
Yes.
It could be Daenerys still sitting there. So,
well, and Tyrion goes through and basically says, we will no longer, kings will no longer be will no longer be born; they'll be chosen, which I think is a great move. Then, of course, Bran flips around on him and says, Tyrion, you're gonna be my hand. And Tyrion's like, no, I don't want it. Like, leave me alone. I'm done with this. I've made bad decisions. I've done bad things. I want to be done. And he's like, no, this is your chance to make up for all those bad decisions. And so Tyrion, through it all, is the one that kind of comes out smelling like roses as kind of the leader of the kingdom, with only Bran to answer to. And talk about, poetic justice. You've got a Lannister and a Stark who can't get along to save their lives, clearly, working together to lead the kingdom at the end, which I don't think anyone would have predicted if we were to have guessed this months ago or years ago.
Yeah, I don't think that Bran becoming king. Do you think that was foreshadowed at all? I've seen maybe some rumors about that. But
I think people thought he was the Night King. I don't think that people thought he would be the king.
The actual king. Yeah.
No. How you'd see different things on social media and whatnot. I think I saw some that listed like the odds of people becoming king at the end, and he was up there. Although I didn't hear any talk about it, and it certainly wasn't on my radar.
No, me either.
Just because it's such an unglamorous pick, but maybe that's why it makes so much sense.
You might be right. He's not very aspirational, which might be a good thing, because they hopefully are going to be getting down to some boring stuff now of fixing things up.
We do a quick scene where you see Brienne writing down Jaime's exploits in the Book of the King's Guard, and it was pretty cool because
she's too good to him.
Yes, she is, and I think she ends it with "He died protecting his queen," which was a nice thing, and she closes it. She's clearly a bit heartbroken over the fact that this is the first time she's given her heart up to somebody, and he kind of threw it back at her and stormed off to go back to Cersei, which I guess was somewhat predictable, but not to Brienne. So for her to do that was pretty special. And then, yes, we get this scene where they're at the small council, and we see Bran and Bronn are a little close together, who the last time we saw him was threatening to take out the Lannister boys with a crossbow. His aspirations have been met. He is now Lord Bronn of the Blackwater, controller, whatever he is, ruler of Highgarden, controller of the Reach. He's basically now one of the most powerful people in the entire realm.
Yeah, he connived his way to all that.
This all from a cutthroat who, there's a funny line when Prince Oberyn from Dorne was here, and he said, "What are you, a bodyguard?" And he said, "No, I'm a knight." He's like, "How'd you become a knight?" "I killed the right people." And that's kind of what he did.
Right.
He killed the right people. And now he's in a pretty good spot. And he is also the, what do they call him, the master of coin. So he's now in charge of all the finances of the entire realm. And he has a great line. I think the brothels have all been burned down. And in my opinion, we should probably build those back up before we worry about the ships or anything else, because that's a good source of coin. And, we have some back and forth. Brienne is the head of the city guard now. We've got Grand Maester Samwell Tarly. Kind of all of our friends are back at the table together, and it was kind of funny. It was kind of comical. It was interesting to see that they're back to debating the same things that have been debated all along.
Yeah, that it really brings us back to that point, which kind of echoes that scene between Varys and Tyrion when they're discussing who really should belong on the throne a couple episodes ago, where I'm like, this is bringing us back to the classic Game of Thrones. Like, how do you run the kingdom? Who belongs there? I thought it was a little bit flippant, though. I kind of wish they would have addressed the fact that, like, there was just a massacre of civilians, and basically everything is in ruins. Like, I wish we would have given a little bit more gravity to that fact.
You hear Tyrion saying we need to build some more cisterns to get clean water. Like, to who? Is there anyone alive in the city?
Yeah.
So I don't know if we're supposed to think that we're far enough removed from that. If we're months beyond that now, it's hard to, again, have a timeline.
I just wish it had a little bit more consequence for the next leadership.
We also have the funny moment when Samwell drops on the book, the Song of Ice and Fire, and Tyrion looks and he says, "Oh, I suppose he was pretty hard on me." And, "No, not really." And he's looking through and he's like, "Well, why not?" He's like, "Actually, I don't believe you were mentioned." And Tyrion's like, "What?" It was kind of comical, but obviously the Song of Ice and Fire is the sixth, it's the series. The series is titled The Song of Ice and Fire. Yes, the book series. So it's kind of a fun to toss that into there. Yep. Yes. So we have this little thing in it. That scene ends with Tyrion finally getting to tell his joke about bringing a jackass and a honeycomb into a brothel. We never hear how it ends, but that was brought in earlier where that joke got cut off. And so I think he was excited to get to tell his joke to a, maybe not an eager audience, but since he's the hand of the king, he can do whatever he wants. So
I thought it was a nice way to
Yeah.
wrap it up. We get a couple of meetings that I think were necessary to just tie off some ends and
yeah,
set us up for, who knows what happens next. I mean, maybe there's a period of peace, but we don't really know. So
and we don't need to.
we don't need to.
Yeah.
Yep. We just know that some of our characters are okay and others
Yeah.
are not. But I really liked this next kind of final movement here. So, right, we have the Stark children
Yeah.
together at the docks, where Jon is going to be shipped up to Boston.
Shipped off to the Night's Watch.
Yeah.
John certainly gets the short straw of the bunch. And here's the one thing I had a bit of an issue
He
with.
does.
So John, such a big deal is he's a Targaryen, and all of a sudden it doesn't matter anymore. Like that never really came into play, other than the fact that it created some conflict between him and Daenerys, but it never came into play. I thought that would be a much more
Me too.
meaningful part of this final season, but it wasn't. And instead, he gets sent back to the Night's Watch, and he basically says, "There's still a Night's Watch," and I think Tyrion's the one that said, "There's always going to be a place for broken boys and bastards to be sent, and that's where you get to go." And for
Felt
all
so
he's
bad.
done,
I was honestly sad about it.
oh my gosh, it's heartbreaking.
Because Jon is
see him.
good. Ultimately, he's the most good character.
Yes, he's never done anything out of spite or out of. I mean, he's been
He
killed.
has a good heart.
Yes.
He's a defender. He's honest. He's courageous.
If anyone deserved a good ending, it was John.
Right.
And it looks like he's not going to get it. He's going back to the Night's Watch. So you're right. This was an awesome scene. So we have,
And this is when I think the Game of Thrones music starts
Yeah.
to kind of kick in here, and we just get a very good kind of final theme.
yes,
As the song's kind of playing slowly and building, and we kind of have these traveling sequences.
yeah. So Arya's on this ship heading west of Westeros, where the maps end, because she had hinted at she wanted to do that previously, and she's on a ship with the Stark. Direwolf as the flagship, the big flag on the ship, and they're going off, and she's standing at the prow of the boat and just off into the unknown, and who knows what's in front of her, but she's clearly proven that she's capable of dealing with whatever she may encounter.
She's basically Columbus.
Yes.
I really feel like kind of an Odyssey series would be awesome with
Yes.
her. Now they've confirmed they're not going to do this, but
Somebody
man, that
will.
would be quite a fun spin-off, because I think she's just a great central character,
Yeah,
and it's kind of too bad we're not going to get that. But at the same time, I like the fact that it's open-ended, and you can just for yourself imagine what might happen, and there's a lot of fun in that. Just thinking about what could her adventures entail west of Westeros.
yeah. So that was awesome. Then we see Sansa getting dressed up in this spectacular dress and being crowned the Queen of the North. This one was a little bit different for me. Like, she's always kind of been, the last several seasons, kind of a cold character. And I don't have a real positive feel for, I mean, obviously she stood up for the North, but you wonder, like, what's going to happen up there? Like, obviously they're separate, okay, but, is she going to be the good queen of the North? Or I've kind of had, like, this Narnia, like, flashback to, like, the Ice Queen or something. Like, I don't know.
I actually have a pretty positive take on her. Like,
Yeah.
I actually hated her from the early seasons. Like, I thought she was just
course.
the worst. I mean, she really is in that first season especially. And then she goes through, a very arduous journey, and a lot of horrible things happen to her. But I feel like in the past couple of seasons, I really start to like her. Like, she starts to demonstrate some leadership characteristics, and
Yeah.
she does start to remind you of her mother too. Like, she does have, like, Catelyn was never, I didn't ever find her very, like, warm and fuzzy. Like, I
No.
thought she was very cold and
Yes. Well, and
calculating, but
so
I
was
think that,
Eddard Stark.
right,
Yeah,
exactly,
they both were.
yeah, they both were, and I think that she really demonstrates those characteristics at this point.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you're right. So she gets crowned the Queen of the North, and then we see Jon coming up to the walls of Castle Black, which have been rebuilt a little bit. You see the doors swing open, because if you'll recall, at the beginning of this season, they abandoned Castle Black and had everyone come back to Winterfell, and that's where they were going to make their stand. So we don't know who's there. We don't know what's left of the Night's Watch, if there's even anyone there. And we get up there, and we see Tormund Giantsbane waiting for him, one of our good friends from, Jon's good friends and one of the, comic relief characters of this series. And then you see his dire wolf ghost standing there with one ear chewed off, and he gets to go say hi. And
he actually pets him.
Yeah, he does. Everyone's happy. He pets Ghost. And then the final scene is him going through the gates, which is very fitting because when I say the gates, underneath the wall, which is fitting because that's the very first scene of the entire
opening shot of the show.
Show is that coming up and some members of the Night's Watch going north of the wall. But this didn't look like he's going in representative of the Night's Watch. I think he was saying, forget it. I've done my time. I'm going to go live as a free folk.
I thought he was kind of leading his people, though.
Yeah.
I felt like he really gained the trust and respect of the Northerners, and I think he was leading them up there. And who knows, what are they going to do? Build settlements?
Well, we saw a green sprout coming out of the ground, so I think the insinuation is the winter that they were worried. Yes. Well, because that is the final book, right? I think Winds of Winter and then...
something of summer?
Yes, something of spring or summer. It's got spring or summer in the name. And so seeing that green shoot of a plant coming up out of there, I think was a pretty clear indication that the winter that they were afraid was going to last for years is over. And spring is on its way.
Okay.
And they're able to go up there and live their life. I mean, Tormund had told Jon when he was leaving, you've got the North in you. You belong in the North. And I think that was clear.
Good foreshadowing.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sad for him, but I hope that he has a good time up there because some of my favorite adventures from Jon were north of the wall. I mean, all the time he spent up there really becoming something of a hero was a lot of fun to watch. So,
well, I think
it's another thing you can just kind of imagine what might be happening next.
I think that's the only place that he was truly at home. I mean, at Winterfell, he didn't fit in. He clearly wasn't comfortable in a leadership role that he was thrust into in other places. When he was north of the wall, there wasn't this rigid structure of hierarchy of who's what. He could just go and do what you want. I mean, his interactions with Ygritte were awesome. I think that's when he was truly happy, is when he was up there. And this is him retreating to that and saying, you know what? I'm glad I don't have to deal with the Iron Throne anymore, with the politics, with the wars. I fought too many wars. I fought too many battles. I'm done. I'm going to go relax in peace with my wolf and my buddies.
Yes.
So
I really liked this whole movement with the music and just seeing each of the Stark children just kind of on their next journey. And the idea that it's kind of an open book. Like the next chapter is whatever you think it might be. I mean, there's a lot of room for interpretation there and a lot to kind of imagine. Like, it doesn't just end happily ever after. It's not, it's not like, oh, well, we'll never have problems again. So it's left open enough, I think, and it didn't tie it up too neatly. I liked where everything ended up for the most part. I mean, I think
I did too.
I think the issue was more of the execution of the pacing and getting there. But I think ultimately when you look at where things landed, I'm satisfied with it. Yeah. And, there's people that watch this show and there's people that don't watch this show. And I can honestly go to anyone who hasn't watched this and say, this has 100% my ringing endorsement. Watch this 20 years from now. I don't care. Rent it. If there's still places to rent movies at that point, go watch it. It really is ultimately about the journey. I mean, you want to see some of these threads have payoff, but ultimately, you want to be north of the wall with Jon, and you want to be, in the south with Daenerys, and you want to be watching these stories weave in and out, and it's such an amazing grand scope of a world that they've built with the show, and I just none of what's happened in these past few seasons has tarnished that for me.
I would agree 100%. I can't think of another, and I'm sure someone could comment who's more well read than I am. A series of books / movies that encompass so many characters and storylines, so many journeys that have to all come together. I mean, it's just totally incredible how we've wound these storylines in and around each other and over and under. And I think some people have complained that once the show outpaced the book, that things really went downhill. I think it had to be expected that you weren't going to get the same product. I mean, there's no way. I mean, George R. R. Martin's incredible. The story that he can put together is absolutely incredible, and the character development that he does is unmatched. And there's no way that in a television show you can capture that. So I think it had to be expected that it wouldn't be the same. But to me, I wanted to be entertained. I wanted to see where they were going to take the story, how the characters were going to continue to grow and interact, and who was going to live and who was going to die. And I was entertained. I mean, I think it's kind of irritating to me a bit where people feel like they're so like enabled, or that the show owed them something, that like they can sign a petition to have them redo this last season because it's not what they wanted. Like, I can totally hate the prequels in Star Wars and pretend they don't exist because I like the original Star Wars, but this to me isn't to that. I mean, I think that these were entertaining. I thought it was fun. I'd be happy to start back at season 1 and watch it all the way through again.
I intend to. I think, Martin is primarily a fantasy novelist. His books are giant tomes with very complex stories that he works years and years and years to build. Well, the writers of Game of Thrones are TV writers.
Yes.
It's a very different medium and a very different kind of story to tell. So you can't expect those things to map up perfectly and stick the landing necessarily. I agree with what you've said, though, just about a lot of the reaction to this series. Like, if a show was designed specifically just for you, it was the Matt show, and it just gave you every little thing that you wanted. First of all, who's telling that story? Because that's creepy.
Well,
and second, when are you ever going to have your expectations shattered, or to be surprised by something, or to fall in love with something you didn't know you would? And I mean, there's no room for serendipity in that sense. Like, it's not an artist's job to set out to tell a story and then realize that the fans don't like how it's going and then change it based on the fans' expectations. And that's sad that we've come to that place. I want to pull in the example of there's a trailer released for the Sonic the Hedgehog movie, which is going to be another stupid video game movie, right? But basically, these Sonic the Hedgehog fans, who I didn't know that those existed, but they do.
I didn't either.
And they came out and started going off about, I guess, just how the character is created, is animated or whatever. The Hedgehog character, the little blue guy.
Yeah.
And the director of this film reached out on social media and was like, "I've heard you, and we're going to change the way he looks."
It's crazy.
This is madness. We've reached peak madness in fan culture.
Go watch the Bear Grylls Man vs. Wild Choose Your Own Adventure on Netflix.
You click your way through it.
You click your way. Do you want to bring the grappling hook or the slingshot on this adventure? Do you want to bushwhack through the jungle or take the river? You get to pick your own path.
You go play an RPG where you can, customize all of your gear and stuff.
I think that's part of it, too.
Go do that thing, but this is not that thing.
Yes. People are going to be mad at us. All the people that hated it are going to be like, these guys are idiots.
And look, there's plenty of room for valid criticism. If you want to say that, hey, this was inconsistent, go right ahead. Make those observations. There's plenty of room. That's healthy, but I think it becomes unhealthy to a certain extent when it's this show didn't completely serve me in every way that I expected it to, and therefore, it didn't do a good job objectively because I didn't feel that way. That's too bad. So,
and I will say, if you compared season 8 to season 7, season 7, I think everyone agreed was really rushed. I mean, the fact that in one episode you went from Jon and his friends north of the wall, surrounded by White Walkers, and Gendry running back to the wall, sending a raven, getting to Daenerys, she flies up, and all in a 3-minute span, and she's up there. I mean, those were kind of unrealistic. That was hard for people to take in. But I think this season did a much better job of slowing down, and the pace was, I think, better.
The slow parts were very good. There
were a few parts, I think we talked about it, where they left the north, and all of a sudden, where are they? They're all of a sudden at King's Landing. there were a few parts that were a little rushed like that, but I thought for the most part, the pacing with this was better. The characters were, we had more time to deal with them as they interacted with each other. I thought it was good. I really enjoyed it.
I think so too. I'm happy with it.
Yeah. I'm kind of sad. I'm not sure what I'm going to do Sunday night now.
I know.
Maybe rewatch an episode or something.
Yep. I think eventually I'll probably watch this show. I should probably pick up the books as well. I think I'll need to do that. And I'll recommend this show to anyone. I think it's worth watching. And we're coming off of this huge... this show is a cultural touchstone that people will be talking about forever. And I think it changed television. It changed the way we interact with stories on social media. It's had all these huge implications, and I can't wait to see what comes next from some of the creators involved. From a lot of these great actors have already gotten awesome, starring roles in Hollywood too. And
considering how long has it been since they've been doing these, where they've been pretty much tied up doing these series for years. Has it been 10, 12 years since the first episode? I don't remember when it started, but it's got to be close.
Yeah. And, I'm excited to, this has set a new standard for what television can be. And I hope we see more of that.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of hard to go from this to picking something else. It's hard to go from watching this. There's a lot of good
stuff out there, but it's just good stuff. It's not Game of Thrones good.
It's hard to jump for this to, I think I'll start watching the next season of Survivor. That's got its own place, but it's not the same thing. And it's just such a grand scale that it's hard to match this in anything else. So if anyone's got some good suggestions, maybe you can comment on this and let us know what we should watch next.
Yeah, and this was obviously our experiment to try to do a podcast for the first time and to talk about a show that we love. We hope that you've listened along, and obviously we're not the only ones. We're not really in a vacuum in terms of being obsessed with the show and fascinated by it. So we hope that people are at least able to enjoy the minutia of debating and discussing and getting engaged with this show.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. We will certainly keep in mind some other ways that we can utilize this platform in the future. So we hope you enjoyed listening to it. Made it through all of our ramblings. We're just two guys sitting in the conference room with our notes after rewatching the show a couple times. And it's been a lot of fun. So, Alex, thanks for doing this with me. It's been a good time, and thanks, everyone, for listening.
It's been very fun.
All right, this is the Three-Eyed Haven signing off.